There we go. All right, we do have, there were a few people in our community that wanted to hear the presentations this evening by Jesse and by Marshall, but we're not able to be here, but so specifically asked that we record the meeting and make it available to them. So after the meeting, within the next couple of days, I'll get it posted up on YouTube and send out a link to all of the participants in case anybody would want to rewatch it or share with your friends or other neighbors or whatever. So after introductions, we'll move into a 10-15 minute segment with Marshall now talking about an update on LRAD or long range acoustic device. And then Steve will take a few minutes. Steve Quarles will take a few minutes and talk about some of the activities that are going on within Firewise in the Homestead community. Steve will then introduce Jesse Figoni, and Jesse's going to talk about primarily about the fuel break in Homestead Valley. And then Chris Can and I will take approximately 5 minutes each and talk a little bit about what's happening with the safety committee and also with the block contacts throughout Homestead Valley. Then hopefully right about 8 o'clock, we'll have some time for an open Q&A.
I have to go pee.
If you have,
We have to pee really bad. Oh, they lost.
You might want to mute.
okay.
Oh my God.
If you have questions during the presentations, looks like we have a 5-minute Q&A built in immediately following Marshall's presentation on LRAD, and we have a 10-minute Q&A built in right after Jesse's communication or presentation on the fuel break. But if you have general questions or specific questions, you can submit them via chat, and Mike will be monitoring the chat during our meeting, and then we can check with him. He can share with us what it is you'd like to know a little bit more about. So I will stop sharing unless someone has a need to continue to look at the agenda at this point. I'm going to need to give up the screen so that I can share it with Marshall now. Marshall, let's see. Do I see you? There you are.
I'm here.
There
Thanks,
he
Jim.
is. Okay, buddy.
Can you give me the ability to? Oh, you did. There it is. Perfect.
Okay, you should.
So thank you to Jim. Thank you to everyone else. Can you see my screen?
It says you've started.
I'm not seeing it.
Don't see anything yet. It says you've started the screen sharing.
Somehow paused it.
Okay.
It's not how you. All right,
Well,
let's start this
Marshall is
over.
doing that. I would just remind everyone what LRAD is, long range acoustic device. And for the last year and a half anyway, well, Marshall's up now, so I'll let him take it.
Okay, perfect. So I'm working on a hybrid computer and it likes at a very specific way. So as Jim was saying, LRAD stands for long range acoustic device. These pieces of equipment are in our community. They've been in our community for quite some time now. They first got introduced to Marin County back in 2019.
What's going on?
Following the Tubbs fire. But I don't want to go into too big of a history. I want to just kind of breeze through it. But I think it is important for us to recognize what they look like in our community and know a little bit of the basics on them, especially for those community members that may have just heard them but never really heard about them. So the parent company to LRAD is Genesis. And that company also purchased Zonehaven. So these platforms are in the process of blending together in a lot of really powerful ways. So as we mentioned, long-range acoustic devices, their big claim to fame is that they can carry both a tone and a verbal message at a long distance without any sort of degradation to the quality of sound. So we're able to get these important pieces of information out into the community within about a half-mile range from these sirens. So that's where the Homestead Valley Community Center property has come into play, because it's right in the middle of that Homestead Valley, and we're really looking at expanding our sites to this location. There's a lot of extra facts on here about their redundancies and their backup power and use of satellite, but we'll probably end up doing more community meetings as we get closer to installation and activation dates. Specifically, if you wanted to know where in your community you'd see this, This is the site. Site A was what we finally selected, that little square footprint there in the blue box. That leasing agreement with the county, because this is county-owned land, is been signed and agreed upon by both the county parks and the fire district. And it's moving forward to the Board of Supervisors, hopefully on this month's agenda. And at any case, it'll be there by January for sure. With that, we're working on all the final steps to advance forward with the installation. We're just waiting for that final approval and some of the permits to clear up so that we could advance forward with scheduling the installation crew to come up and install that site. Like I mentioned, notifications going out to the public. This is what we do typically. So we send out mailers beforehand once the system's been installed and we're ready to activate it. If for some reason there's an odd time when we place it, sometimes we commission them for emergency use only. And I'll get into the concept of testing here in a moment. But either way, we'll send it out to the community, letting them know that this is in their community and what to look for. It's kind of a courtesy notice within a range of the siren, letting all the residents know that it is there. And then also asking for them to provide a little bit of feedback. And I'll get into that in a moment as well. Again, here's some of the photographs from around Mill Valley of some of the pre-existing ones. This is just kind of a filler slide, but really wanted to call out in fine print up top that testing at this specific location will be limited. That's part of that leasing agreement with the county because it is on county land. We'll only be audibly testing these sirens between August to January. So we've got about half the year. There are other conditions in the works to figure out ways to evaluate it in the field. But the benefit to one of our redundancies with the system is it's constantly doing a self-check via satellite back to Genesis and back to our website that we have access to. So we can confirm that it's connected and we have access to it. It's just that sound being put out to the community will be limited to the months of August to January. And that's one of the reasons why I call out the idea of what I'll mention in a moment is, did you hear it? Because that campaign that we have going gets the feedback from the community at each one of your homes and residences and allows us to map that and have a better understanding of where we're reaching. And I'll show an example of that in a moment. But what you'll hear, and I don't know if I'll be able to play this, I'll try in a second, but haven't had success, is an air raid siren followed by a detailed message for the test. So in this circumstance, it'll be some sort of air raid siren. I'll try and play an example of that in a moment. But I'll say this is a test at the Southern Marin Emergency Notification System. If this were a real emergency, and there's a couple different testing messages that we're testing, but one of the standard ones is you'll be directed to evacuate the area, or you'll be directed to evacuate to your nearest community refuge area. Some of the Mill Valley sites are a little bit more specific because their community's been training to community refuge areas specifically. So they'll actually instruct them to go to a certain area. And we're working on additional language that we're populating with these tests. Actually, I'm already recording some of these messages for the site. So as soon as it's ready to go live, all of these messages will be pre-populated, both for testing and for emergency evacuation purposes. And then it will always close with, this was only a test, and another air raid siren. So part of our Did You Hear It campaign, and this is one example, one of our actually earlier maps of some of the information that we're getting back. We're getting feedback from people of where they are within the population, within our topography, of where they hear us and they don't hear us. And beyond this, you can't see here, is some of these data points give me very crucial information as far as what they were doing when they heard it. Some of them have given feedback. For example, am I hard of hearing? I couldn't hear it at all, or I was hard of hearing, I heard a noise and I stepped outside and I could hear a clear message, or I was vacuuming and I turned off my vacuum and then stepped outside and could hear it. But probably the most important is where people don't hear it, because we want to identify that. We haven't got a whole lot of feedback because a lot of people don't know about this until they hear the siren. But as we advance forward, I anticipate getting more feedback from the Homestead community and plotting more of those. So anytime you're out and about on the first Saturday of the month, if you hear the siren, even off in a distance, feel free to go on. I put the QR code here. We mail this out. We also post it on a lot of our different social media networks and community newsletters the week prior to our tests, because we want to really get the community involved so they're familiar with this. And then you can provide that information back to us wherever you are. It's a fun activity too for younger children if they're trying to learn about sound and how to be involved with their community or their government, because this provides immediate feedback to us. The current coverage, and this is more tailored to the north. to the Mill Valley area. But you can see we have a kind of a wide spread of sirens. What we identified though is that we do have a shortfall coming into that Homestead community. We've got a small amount of coverage to the north part, kind of north, the northwest portion of Homestead up towards the top edge of the valley, but we really can't penetrate down into the valley at all. So this siren will be critical. And as we expand our network, you can see there's a series of network sirens being implemented throughout the southern portion of Marin County. The green here indicate sites that have already been installed and are actively being tested. Obviously, the stars, the Homestead location, and then the orange ones are being worked on right now at a number of different levels, whether they're going through environmental compliance or we're still trying to get stakeholder buy-in. And then eventually, hopefully, with funding and support of the community, we'll slowly bring all the rest of these sirens on board, allowing us a much more strategic nature, but while still not putting one of these on every street corner. Our intent is to really get the coverage we need and to be able to be strategic in our evacuation efforts, but not have one on every corner because it's not really that necessary. But it's one of our major tools that we have in our tool bag. And I think that concludes my presentation at this point. Apologize if I went a little quick there, but I really wanted to make sure that we got to the points in hand and give plenty of time for question and answers.
All right. So just to clarify for folks, the closest LRAD installation to Homestead Valley at this point is up at the Edgewood Reservoir.
Correct.
And that became operational the 1st of October. Am I correct?
I think that was the first time we started testing it. Yeah. But actually, no, I think you're accurate. I think that one got installed and it became operational on the first.
So some of you at the east end of Homestead Valley have reported having heard that siren on the 2 tests, the October and the November test, I think. So keep an ear out for that first Saturday in December. Is there anybody online who actually heard that LRAD? No. Okay. We're going to improve that within the next few months.
and there are benefits to not hearing.
I heard it, but couldn't understand it.
There we go. Yeah, the siren definitely has the ability to carry further than the verbal message, which is key because it will at least get your attention. The benefit to not hearing the verbal message is that when this new one comes online, sometimes if they're too close to each other, they can get kind of an echoing effect. Right. So with that in mind, we're trying to space them out in a very strategic fashion. It's really where Edgewood and Homestead Valley, they became such key components because they're just that right distance from one another.
Are there any general questions for Marshall with regard to the LRAD systems? I've got a specific one, but if there are any general questions that any of you have.
How's it being paid for?
So currently, the first 5 that went in, those were all funded back in 2019 by the City of Mill Valley residents. They approved through the city. The second 5 that we got were through some of the core funding, or sorry, my apologies, some of the local funding that we had with the MWPA, which is the Wildfire Mitigation Project or Prevention Authority. And that funding is allocated to one, evacuation efforts, and the other one is fuel reduction. And that's what Jesse Figoni will talk about in a moment, is those fuel reduction. But some of our efforts that we really focus on is how to enhance what we're doing for evacuation efforts, and that is implementing these sirens into the community. The rest of them have still been through the MWPA, but through core funding. And that's why you see that we've expanded beyond just the Southern Marin Fire District, but we're including other elements and other players like the City of Mill Valley getting additional sirens, Tiburon, Marin City, all the way out to the coast. We're trying to incorporate all of our players down in the Southern Marin area in order to provide significant coverage, because we all know that as you evacuate, you got to make sure you clear everyone out in front of you as well. So we are really in it together. Fire knows no boundaries. So
who's going to be responsible for maintenance on these units?
So the maintenance has been factored in within our district budget to maintain them as we move forward. But additionally, we're working currently to get additional language added into what's called the multi-agency hazard mitigation plan, which sits with the county, which represents all of the agencies and districts throughout the whole county, typically around floods and tsunamis, but also there's a huge fire element. But the evacuation and fire risk element through sirens and notification has always had a very small piece. But what that opens up by adding language in there is huge assets within the FEMA grant system, because they require you to have that acknowledged within your county. So we're putting that language in. That document gets refreshed in spring of next year, and we're hoping to utilize that to transition into additional FEMA funding to keep these systems operational at a minimal cost to the district. But the district has already factored this all into our budget.
I've got a significant or specific question for you, Marshall, and this comes from Marin Horizon School, who will be immediately adjacent to this installation when it occurs. They're on the property, share the property line with the community center. And they're a bit concerned in the event of an emergency, when this signal system is going to be used, they're likely also going to be wanting to speak to their student body that would be assembled on the schoolyard, and are concerned. They'll be using local megaphones, and are curious to know if this system will drown out or overwhelm any of their local communication efforts with their student body.
Yeah, and I think that's a key consideration to take into account. The trick is this message is typically about a minute long.
Right.
We have the control to increase and lower the volume at will, remotely or with preset recordings. We also have the ability to limit the frequency. So we can set it off to go off for 1 minute every 10 minutes. So yes, there may be a 60-second moment where it's a little bit more challenging to coordinate, because now there's two wavelengths of sound interrupting each other. But ultimately, if this thing's going off, it is in the worst case of a scenario, and it's going to be removing, it's going to be telling everyone to leave the area ultimately. So it's going to be getting probably the most important message out there. But I think that's a partnership effort that we'll have to follow up on with the school. And that's one of our major efforts all the time, is helping to evaluate and prepare their evacuation process.
So just to clarify, the message will be set or can be set to repeat on a specific cycle. Is that what you were saying? And that cycle is programmable. It could be every 5 minutes, every 15 minutes, every 25 minutes, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. We have the utmost control. It's all about building it out ahead of time, just like the testing protocol with the county. We'll program in the months that we want it to sound off, and then the months that we don't want to sound off, there will be no pre-programmed testing. We'd have to actually go in there and manually sound it if we wanted an additional month of testing.
And the length of the message would be approximately a minute.
That's what we're aiming for. Obviously, there's circumstances where, if we're talking about evacuating an entire community, and we're maybe a second day into the event, and we want to broadcast out a 45-minute continuous message, we could just put it on a loop if we wanted to, if we were just trying to get people out of the area and just basically annoy them away. But in reality, the tactics behind it initially is short blasts of 1 minute, get the message out there. We might even have to shift to a different message possibly, and that's going to be under the call of the EOC.
Okay. Steve, did you have a question, or are you ready to move on?
No, I have a question.
I'm sorry, you do have a question, Steve?
Steve has a question, and then Mike.
So I just wanted to confirm that, is maintenance of the system done under contract to Genesis or LRAD, or is that something that Southern Red Fire will do?
Yeah, no. So it's typically Genesis coming out and inspecting and maintaining. The systems themselves don't need a whole lot of maintenance, unless for some reason, inside the box, there is the basic components, which is equivalent to, a computer and even normal electronics that we have. So if battery needs to be replaced or something along those lines, get into that basic box. The horns themselves, unlike the old school style rotating beacons, there's no mechanical rotating device. If we want to tweak the sirens and adjust them to meet what we're aiming to cover, we could do that, and that'd be probably early on. But in this case, we're going for a 360-degree radius here at this site. So unless we wanted to eliminate speakers in a certain direction for some reason, once the first year is in and we've tested and we kind of feel good about the setting, it'll probably just sit, and then we just have to get in there. We do an annual visual check, which the district will be doing, and then Genesis will be coming out and servicing it. A lot of the servicing is on the technical level. They need to come do an update, or if they need to push an update for the firmware over either their satellite, or if they have to manually do it.
Okay. Mike?
I've got a chat question here. How is it powered?
So these have, so this site specifically, we're not planning on trenching any power at this point in time. It's going to be a single standalone pole with backup deep cycle batteries inside of it, along with dual solar panels that will keep those batteries topped off. So initially it'll stand there free of the grid, but there's always the potential and option to, in the future, trench in additional power. The manufacturer likes additional power, but the solar aspect in this area allows for that additional redundancy not to be immediately required. The benefit of the solar and the battery is it can stand off the grid with it functioning at all times. And it's got satellite, so it's not relying on 5G or any sort of telecommunication. It's just a standalone pole.
Okay. Steve, did you have a follow-up?
No, I
Oh,
just
okay.
said thank you.
If
I had one question.
yes, Eric.
Yeah, the sirens that have been running on first Saturdays for the past decades, those ones are still running currently?
They are, yes. Yeah, the town of Tiburon runs theirs the first Saturday at 1 o'clock, and then the rest of the southern part of the county, so Mill Valley, all the way up to Throckmorton and those areas, they run theirs at noon on the first Saturday.
So how can you distinguish if it's the legacy sirens or the new LRAD when you hear one?
The legacy sirens, they'll only be a siren. It'll also kind of be a pulsating in and out because it's rotating typically. Some of the fixed legacy ones that are on like a fire station are extremely directional. Typically, they're just they're kind of 180 degrees of each other. And then what style siren it is. So we currently are functioning with that air raid siren. So it's got that slow buildup. It's also nice because it doesn't startle anyone if they're at the base of the pole. They hear it build up and give them kind of time, whereas some have more of that wail or just a broad siren coming out. That's the benefit of testing, is people can be familiar. But the big tall tale is the verbal message that comes afterwards, where we can actually direct people verbally what we're looking for, what we want them to do. We can clear the threat afterwards. It's very clear. They don't have to go and seek out additional information to take immediate action.
Okay, so when you're getting feedback from people through that link on whether they've heard the siren or not, are you distinguishing that you actually heard the verbal message so that you can tell if they've heard the new ones or the old ones?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we asked, I tried to keep it real simple. So there's about 5 questions, did you hear it? And then it's, if you heard it, did you hear nothing at all? Did you hear just siren? I think it's, did you hear siren and verbal message? And then did you hear like siren and verbal message with echoing? Because I'm trying to identify where the echoing is so I can kind of pinpoint maybe if it's a certain valley or whatnot. And that's just kind of the first question, is which one of these did you hear? And then where were you roughly geographically? And then what were you doing? Were you outside? Were you inside? Were you jogging with headphones? And then I take all that information, and then, just general information, if they're willing, is, who you are or additional comments on it. So, but the biggest things like you're calling out is what was heard and where were you? And then what were your surroundings at the time of hearing it?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Marshall. I think best if we cut it off here. At this
Yeah, I'll
point,
hang
but
around till the
maybe-
end. So if anyone else has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So Steve, I'll turn it to you, and you can introduce Jesse and talk a little bit about Firewise.
Thanks. Thanks, Jim. So I just wanted to briefly update the community about our Firewise community status. We have successfully applied for renewal of our Firewise community status. Haven't heard the result yet, but we did everything we needed to do to maintain our status. This year we had to submit a 3-year plan. It's sort of a CAL FIRE requirement now, and we did that and met our financial match that we need to do to continue to be a Firewise community. So thanks to the community for your efforts in filling your green bins and asking for debris boxes and participating in the chipper days that are offered by MWPA and Southern Marin Fire through our Measure U funds. So thanks very much for your support in those efforts. And I just wanted to give Jesse now time to talk about the next big project, I think, and that is a shaded fuel break that's going to as Jesse will say, it's going to affect all of our properties adjoining public lands. So Jesse has been with Southern Fire since 2019, I think. So several years here. He keeps getting promoted. He used to be the guy that would come to your house, and he's still will, I suppose, but he has been promoted since he first came here. Good on him. And but he's the guy to tell us about this shaded fuel break that's coming our way shortly. So I'm going to pass it to Jesse, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Appreciate those kind words, and certainly we got our work cut out for us. And I think we're making good progress. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Jesse Figoni. I am the vegetation management specialist for Southern Marin and Mill Valley now. So, it's very fortunate to be here and, kind of talk about some of these large scale projects that we're excited to get some boots on the ground and get going. So let me see if I can share my screen. Let's see. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
All right. So tonight's agenda, obviously we already covered introductions, but there's some things I do want to discuss about this project. So previous fire prevention risk activities, SMFD, Tamalpais Homestead shaded fuel break, which we're all, excited to, hear about. Objectives, project plan, entities to be involved, project area, planned work, and we'll do a little Q&A afterwards. So, SMFD fire prevention. Hold on one second. I need to minimize this. Let me minimize that. Sorry, I'm not too technically gifted. There we go. So increased focus since 2015, and we certainly accelerated by passing Measure U and shortly after MWPA. So these were tax measures for fire prevention efforts, not only for fuel reduction, but for public education and notification, which Fire Inspector Marshall now touched bases on for the LRAD system. And so, a lot of time and effort goes into these projects and identifying them, whether that be from previous fire behavior, slope, topography, fuel load. But Southern Marin has done a lot of scientific work or researches and district-wide studies to see where the risk is. And so we do have a lot of good material out there. On our website specifically, we have the 2020 Southern Marin Wildfire Hazard and Risk Assessment, where there's a lot of good information in there. It is a 162-page document. So if you're curious about it to understand some of the riskier, higher risk areas in our district, it's a great document to go over and review. And then also the Marin County Community Wildfire Protection Plan. This is a district-wide assessment regarding projects and programs and where work's getting done. But specifically for the Homestead project, this has been on the back of my mind for a while, in certain sections specifically, even before MWPA. But the project details really started in 2020, when I definitely wanted to pursue fuel reduction efforts in this Homestead Valley Land Trust, National Park Service land, and you'll see the map here shortly.
Okay.
So a little backstory about MWPA and specifically this project. So the project was approved. It was submitted probably mid 2021, early 2021, but it was approved by the Advisory Technical Committee in December 15th, 2021. I did put in for $240,000, but that's actually changed due to environmental compliance and the cost that to do business with our environmental compliance contractor, Panorama, who's done a very thorough and detailed job on reviewing the areas for cultural resources, along with environmental habitats and all that good stuff that we want to be cautious about. So this is a fairly substantial project. It's about 61 acres, give or take. We are looking at doing 100 feet to 150 feet of defensible space between open space and developed properties. So kind of going back on our hazard risk assessment. So a lot of our vulnerable areas are homes adjacent to these open space areas. And so we certainly want to reduce risk in those. So this is a multi-agency collaboration where we have a lot of partners and partnerships to move this forward. So just to name a few, it's the National Park Service, GGNRA, Golden Gate National Recreational Area. We also have Marin County Open Space District. We have the MWPA. We have Tamalpais Community Service District and the Homestead Valley Land Trust. And so we certainly appreciate everyone's partnership and willingness to do what's right and try to reduce risk in these areas. So this is the project site. Things can change, things can be enhanced or decreased, but this is the area that we proposed a project in. And so we are implementing these shaded fuel breaks in strategic locations throughout the district. And like I was saying, these are based off of the wildfire mitigation assessment, risk assessment. And so I don't know if you're familiar with, but recently Mike St. John worked with TCSD in completing the Tam Valley fuel break just below Eastwood Way. They've actually finished this year. And so what I'm looking to do is build upon those good efforts and work efforts and continue on that shaded fuel break. So this is the next portion of that. So I do want to show a video. This is the Tubbs fire. This is at my previous department where I was a firefighter on the line. I'm not trying to scare you all, but there's certain things. This is a catastrophic wildfire during the Tubbs fire where wind conditions, fuel load, severe drought, all led up to cause the perfect storm for the Tubbs fire. And so the goal of this video is just to bring awareness and the importance of having defensible space and establishing shaded fuel breaks in these locations, because you could just imagine, homes adjacent to this video. So the volume's a little messed up, so I turned it down. But we're all on the roadside. There's a lot of broom, grasses, fennel along the road. There's active fire around us, and it's about to light off due to preheating and wind conditions. And so those are the type of fuels we want to reduce, and make it safer for our community and our residents out there. So shaded fuel break. What is a shaded fuel break? So there's a couple terms out there. There's fuel break and shaded fuel break, and I want to kind of make sure everyone kind of understands the difference between them. So a fuel break is where you have dozers putting in line on ridge tops and just completely decimating that area to prevent fire jumping over, spotting over it, and allows crews to have a safe area to stop the fire as fire is approaching. And so shaded fuel break is kind of pre-treating those areas, bringing the forest back to what it was, not completely decimating, but just cleaning it up. We do have a lot of invasives, which I'm sure everyone's well aware of. I work with a lot of Maverick and previously Mark Stahl on broom removal. Broom removal is very invasive and it's choking out our forests. So a lot of our projects involve removing these invasives from these areas. So the goal is to reduce hazardous vegetation and provide a break in the continuous vegetation, kind of like I was saying, to allow access for fire crews, safety areas, so crews can fight the fire, and for fire control along the perimeter of these completed areas. And another benefit is to slow the spread of the fire, kind of like the video. there was a buffer along that roadside, the fire wouldn't have come up all the way to the road's edge. And so that's kind of a good visual representation of it. So, we're looking at just removing the invasives, cleaning up the forest, limbing up trees. And the important thing here is by doing that, we're reducing ladder fuels getting up into the canopy of the tree, because once there's a canopy fire, it's a lot more challenging for firefighters, fire personnel to put it out. You kind of need air support for that. So we want to try to create that buffer zone between the surface fuels, ground fuels, up to those low hanging branches. So a lot of treatment efforts have been, limbing up branches 10 feet on trees, removing the understory, making sure you can kind of see through the forest. You want to be able to see through it, but also keep the, the beauty and the trees and all that good stuff, which is why people live in Marin County and Mill Valley. So shaded fuel break. So this is a good representation. So these photos were actually taken from the Tam Valley fuel break. I believe this is on Marin Drive, if I'm not mistaken. But you can see the differences. We have a choked out forest on the left-hand side with a lot of invasives and broom, low hanging branches. And then if you look on the right, you see, what a forest should look like, nice, clean understory. And what really that does, that really kind of like I was saying, reduces the fire intensity, slows the rate of spread, reduces risk, which we're all trying to achieve. Here's another video. As you can imagine, this is a road abutting an open space on GGNRA property. And so you can just imagine if there's a wildfire approaching that roadside, the residents in the area would have a hard time evacuating if unfortunately they're leaving at the last minute. So our schedule, a lot of time and effort has been actually put into this project. I know I've been in communication with Steve and Brian Spring and Beth, I believe, regarding our timeline. And so initial contact with agencies. So like I was saying, there's a lot of coordination between 5 different agencies to see this one through. We have our locations determined. And then, some of the things we do got to consider, some areas of the project, there may be habitats and ecological, environmental things we have to look out for. So, we're always going to have CEQA, and we're going to have crews trained up to understand, habitats, maybe, we're going to have Marin County Parks on board, so maybe they can identify these areas. But as we're moving along, we're going to be cautious about the environment. And so that's something I really want to spread the word about. And so I filed the NOE, completed on May 2022. The federal land, national GGNRA, they do have their own environmental compliance review, but I believe that was completed 2 months ago. So this project has been surveyed and reviewed, and we're going for a category 4, 100 feet, 150 feet category exemption for CEQA. And so this is actually my first meeting regarding this project, so it's kind of a good run through. We do want to involve more community meetings as we get closer to the start date. This would be hosted by Southern Marin. We are looking at a site visit to invite residents in the community to go to a location. I am working with the MWPA on that. That's going to be a multi-agency collaboration. We are trying to get the National Park Service to attend also. And then in January, our goal is to start work in January. And I know I've been trying to push for it, but there's a lot of legwork that needed to be done on top of other things. So kind of like I was saying, project details, we're here to limb up branches, reduce ladder fuels, break up the continuous amount of vegetation to reduce fire spread, remove dead and down material in these areas, and potentially select tree removal, hazardous trees, or dead or dying trees. And our goal is to complete this whole area December 2023. And so this is the area. I know we already kind of looked at this, but these are the areas that we'll be treating. So Friars and Melaleuca, this is site 1. And you can see this is Eastwood Lane, just south or kind of in the middle of this project. But the Tam Valley fuel break ended where that bottom red box arrow is. Waterview Laddie Lane. This is the site where I believe we're looking at doing the community site visit meeting. So please, when that meeting comes up, we'll certainly want to reach out to our partners, Homestead Valley Land Trust. We'll post it on our website, next door social media accounts regarding that upcoming meeting. Rydell Avenue, Rhonda Way. This is another area. Drone Park Circle, North Ferndale Avenue, Ridgeview Avenue, Laverne Avenue, and Amaranth Boulevard, Tamalpais Drive. And so as you saw some of those worksite areas, access may be challenging. So, we'll want to reach out to neighbors that are willing for our crews to, access some of these very hard and challenging terrain areas. But it's a collaboration and partnership that we hope we can get going. So after November, approval actions for work locations, kind of like I was saying that, each site may be different than another. And so we need to kind of address certain things. Some locations might be great. Some locations might have already work done. I know the Homestead Valley Land Trust, Mavericks, and the whole team has been doing a phenomenal job in maintaining these areas. So, we can certainly look at, looking over those sections that have had work done and, focus or enhance other areas that need it. So the biggest delay for this project, which I was hoping to, get started, earlier or later this year, this month or next month, but the request for proposal. So this was an in-house process of opening these bids for contractors to bid on. I won't really go into much detail, but it's a pretty lengthy document that we felt was right to allow all contractors to bid on such a good job. So kind of like I was saying, develop work prescriptions for specific areas, sensitive habitat. We certainly have to take that in consideration. And, contact adjacent private property owners. We do want to work in all these locations. Some terrain and access might be challenging. So we hope to get to work with some of those property owners. If not, our contractors or whoever wins it will certainly be able to, look at plan B or other options. And so my goal, fingers crossed, we'll get this whole section or whole area completed by the end of next year. And that concludes it.
So are there any questions for Jesse?
I do have one, and this relates to the request for proposals. It sounds as though the RFPs have not been published yet.
So it's like a 15-page document with a lot of legal information, scope of work, you name it, it's in there. And so we completed that document, or we do have a meeting with an outside, it's called Bid Express. It's where we can upload these bids, let it sit for 30 days, allow contractors to bid on it, and then we can review them. So our goal, we do have a meeting on December 1st, and I want to get them in there. And then come the end of December, we'll get all the bids. And the first week of January, I really want to get the ball rolling, get a contractor lined up, and then start mid-January.
So your hope is to be able to open bids in early January.
So the bidding process would be through December.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So will that walkthrough at the Laddie Lane area, will that be then before this process starts? So it would be in December or early January?
We are looking at mid to late January. So no pressure, need to get some stuff done in that area. If not, it could be an educational site visit, understanding, fuel loads leading up to homes, and then, always, welcome residents to revisit the area and check out the work that's been done. Or, there's other discussions about having like a pre-site visit and check out the fuels, and then coming back at a later date to see the work completed.
Great.
Throwing around some ideas.
Thank you.
We are one of the houses that's up against this at the section 5 zone down on Laverne. And I am wondering how we are going to be informed and whether we will have a contact person that we can talk to when, you know, our backyard gets visited by people with chainsaws.
Yeah. So, that is a good question. I am working on a mailer to notify residents, from the work. You know, our goal is to obviously keep the residents informed. We do have, I don't know if you're familiar with our website or newsletter or, social media accounts, but we do have multiple means of, you know, notifying residents. If I had the time to knock on every door, I would love to do that. But, you know, we certainly want to, you know, use our outlets that we have available, whether that through mail, social media. And then I would be the point of contact for this. I believe you have my email and phone number, so you can call me anytime, and we'll certainly, you know, address any questions. I'll be reviewing the crews. I'll be on site quite a bit. You know, obviously I have other duties and responsibilities I need to attend, but you know, my focus is to see this project through and successful and without any hiccups.
Jesse, are you monitoring the chat by any chance?
I am not.
There's a question. Have you already surveyed vegetation, or does this take place as part of the work to ID and flag vegetation for removal?
So I surveyed some of the areas. Typically, I like to go out with the contractor and use flagging to, you know, get that 100 feet, 150 feet mark. So there is some more legwork that needs to be done, but I definitely want to be working one-on-one with the contractor that gets awarded the bid.
Okay. Is it likely to be multiple contractors or a single, or do you know at this point?
I'll have to, you know, this is kind of a learning process with the RFPs. I would like to have just one contractor. So if there's any issues, you know, I can go straight to the boss, and, you know, figure it out as we go along. But, you know, I could see us maybe doing 2 contractors, you know, it'd be technically quicker. But, you know, we'll have to have an internal discussion and see how to proceed with either going with one or multiple contractors.
Any other thoughts or questions for Jesse?
Will some of the material be cut and lay, or is it all going to be chipped?
Chipped and dispersed, chipped and haul away. There's a lot of means. We're not going to be leaving piles there. We're not going to be doing debris pile burning or anything like that. It's either going to be chip and lay, or being hauled off. Yeah.
Most of locations are inaccessible. How are you going to get a chipper in there?
So there are, I don't know if you're familiar with one of our contractors that we use quite commonly, but Raul F. and Forster and Kroger. He has the people power. He's done phenomenal work in challenging areas where I had no idea work could be done. But he's hopefully he gets the bid. You know, obviously we welcome anyone to bid, but these contractors are pretty dynamic and adapt to these situations. But kind of like I was saying, you know, we do want to work with some of these residents that may have an easier path access to these very remote locations. And so, you know, certainly myself would want to interact with them, you know, and work with their schedule and see if that's an option that's available.
Okay. Sounding like maybe we've reached the end of this. Last chance for anyone, if you'd like to query Jesse about anything related to the fire break.
Well, the one more thing is that there are historical markers all the way through those areas that will you be kind of looking for those? They have survey markers all along that area between GGNRA and Homestead Valley. Survey markers, historical survey markers, all the way through there, that area. I don't know if you're aware of that.
That's the first of my knowledge.
Okay. Well, we can talk about that later, but there's a whole string of them there that I think were put there in the 50s. And it would be nice to, kind of see where those are. And I don't know.
All right.
So we have more of an idea where that is.
Maverick, are you at all aware of where it's more specifically where they are? And could
Well,
you?
I know where some of them are, but there's a lot of them that I don't know. I know where like 3 or 4 of them are.
Yeah, I mean, just even going through with a can of marker paint and spraying them.
Well, I mean, on my end, yeah, but I think there's a lot more that
Yeah.
have just been overtaken back in,
Sure,
a long time ago. It was just grassland back there in the day,
sure.
so.
I GPS tag these when I find them, so I have a number of them
Oh,
with
great.
GPS coordinates, if you want them.
Okay.
I'd
I
be
just
more than
think-
happy to plot any GPS coordinates you have. And we have ways of collecting the GPS coordinates as well as we come across them, but it's just a training effort to the crew that's awarded the bid.
They also have the chippers that are on 4x4s that they have out in Inverness that they use a lot, that they just have a chipper that is just built on the back of a 4x4 that they just run into these hard areas. And I don't know if that would be usable for you guys also. That they don't pull behind, it's actually built on the back of the truck. And they use it a lot in Inverness out there because there's so many areas that are so steep that they can't get a chipper into these areas. So that's why they use these, that equipment. It's pretty good.
I'm gonna cut it off here. Maybe we're getting into some problem solving, and I think that can all be worked
Sure.
out with Jesse and his crew, and Maverick and Maribeth and other people that are familiar with the terrain. And unless there's a last question for Jesse, I'm going to move on.
There's a question in the chat there, Jim.
Okay, since this is taking place during the wet season, it may be worth looking out for sudden oak death disease symptoms. Do you have an arborist or anything that works with you or alongside these crews as they go through and might be identifying susceptible trees?
So we work with our partnering agencies. So Marin County Open Space, obviously has some type of mark on this project, and we would reach out to them. All the contractors we use for tree service does have an arborist. And so whoever wins the bid, that would be a requirement of the winning bid.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I'm not an arborist, maybe down the road, but I leave it to the professionals. I'm just here for the fire risk, and then obviously writing that fine line between reducing fire risk, but also being conscious about the environment and doing what's right.
Yeah, maybe before you leave, Jesse, if you could post your email in the chat.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
Good.
getting sidetracked. Yeah, I'll respond to it.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, so Chris, it looks like it shifts to you and me for a couple of minutes.
Okay,
And I'll let you take it on for starters, please.
okay. My main message is to thank those of you who serve as block contacts for Homestead Valley. I think there are 7 of you present tonight. The block contacts maintain an accurate resident data list, which facilitates good communication in our community. 63 of our 69 blocks are covered by a block contact, and roughly 2/3 of Homestead residences have at least one email address on our Firewise Safety Committee contact list. And this is in large part because of the work of the contacts. Block contacts also play a major role in the accomplishments of Firewise Safety Committee, such as fire fuel reduction projects. Many of these are initiated by contacts and organized by or they play a role in organizing the project. And also the recent evacuation drill that was organized last March. The residents who participated in the drill commented that they learned a lot and felt better prepared as a result of the practice drill. The drill raised awareness and clarified questions. And during the organization of the drill, we gained new contacts and more emails for our contact list. The drill encouraged a sense of community in many blocks. After the drill, there were some block parties, and there were in several areas neighbors outside discussing the drill. The role the contacts play definitely improves the level of disaster preparedness in Homestead. As far as the agenda for the Block Contact Program in 2023, we plan to develop a cluster organization in Homestead by dividing the 69 blocks into 3 to 4 geographically contiguous clusters. The purpose for this organization is to support communication between blocks as well as within them, and to support the Firewise program in organizing joint fire fuel reduction projects within each cluster. Question? We will also continue to support the Firewise safety goals of encouraging individual residents to do practice drills, a good way to determine how prepared you are, and will support the planning of a future evacuation drill, with the goal of being prepared, as was a community in South Lake Tahoe in the summer of 2021, when they were ordered to evacuate. They were quoted as saying, "We spent several years organizing and doing practice drills. When we were ordered to evacuate, our community evacuated within 20 minutes. It was flawless." So it speaks to what we've done and what our goals are.
Great. Well, I'll kind of tag on to that. Chris mentioned that one of the significant outcomes from the March evacuation drill that we had in the debrief was an interest in ways of building better and more effective and reliable communication within blocks and between blocks. And so our effort to reorganize into zones and clusters is one of the ways of beginning to address some of those communication issues. And another thing that we did is we invited representatives from 6 or 8 of the blocks of our 59 blocks to a meeting back in September to become familiar with an app called Joinable. And the purpose of Joinable is to facilitate communication and build community. And so we had representatives from different 6 or 8 different blocks, all of whom had expressed interest in wanting some help with developing some communication tools that might help them. We left it to them. They came, they saw, we had a demonstration of Joinable. I think that the community up on Amaranth has jumped on it and are beginning to work with that tool, and we'll begin to get some feedback shortly, I hope, as to whether or not they're finding it to be effective or not. But if in fact this cell phone app called Joinable does prove to be an effective tool for building community and facilitating communication between and amongst our blocks, then we'll try to push it out, build a broader awareness of what it is and what it can do, and encourage other blocks to maybe join into the effort. Chris mentioned we're trying to subdivide our 59 blocks into a handful of zones and clusters. And she tasked me with that before she headed off to Michigan a couple of weeks ago. And I made a first stab at it. And so in the next couple of weeks, I think Chris and I and maybe a few other people need to look at my first effort at dividing up Homestead Valley into 4 or 6 different zones and see if we can't come up with a different organizational structure that addresses our communication needs a little more effectively. Some other thing, keep in mind, back in November, what was the 8th of November, I think, was daylight savings time change. And keep in mind that as happened on that weekend, our Central and Southern Marin NRGs, maybe all of them Marin NRGs, are going to take advantage of those time change weekends in March and in November to encourage local communities to participate in some kind of emergency preparedness drills. What we did this last time was ask all of you to build on your evacuation experience back in March and practice it again this past November. And if you hadn't done it in March, maybe take it on as your initial effort at an evacuation drill in this past November. So come March, you'll be hearing from us about some other suggestions for some time change emergency preparedness activities that you can do with your families or in our community. To that end, it's occurred to me that one of the things last year we really focused on evacuations and being better prepared for evacuation. I'm thinking that it might be worthwhile for our community, and I will have some conversation around this with our steering committee, but to focus some time and energy on being better prepared to shelter in place. There are going to be a lot of circumstances in which emergency situations will arise where we're not going to need to evacuate, but we may need to shelter in place for hours, if not days. And what do we need to be prepared for that? And that's different than being ready to evacuate your premises. Couple other things I would like to share, I guess. There are a few of us that have been doing this for a number of years. And I know, just speaking for myself, I'm ready to not leave the safety committee, but to share the work a little bit with whomever else might be able and willing to get involved. And Sheila Johnson-Brousseau has stepped forward and through conversation with Chris, Sheila has become a liaison with the Southern Marin NRG and the CERT program. And it will be working with Chris and I and the safety committee on how we can better interface with those programs and integrate our resources with their resources and so forth. Last fall, Jim Small came over and helped out and we did a little inventory and survey of the Homestead Valley Community Center in terms of its preparedness to serve as a shelter if we ever need to shelter in place. We made a start at it, but we have a lot more work to do. And there are other things like that we could use some help with. And Chris and I will be breaking down the roles and responsibilities of the Safety and Firewise Committee and put them out there on a platter for you all to choose one from that you might be able to fits with your time and resources and skill sets. And my hope is that people like Sheila and Jim that have stepped forward and offered to take on some of that responsibility would also begin to become to sit with us on our steering committee and help us direct our safety and firewise efforts as we move into the future. So you'll be hearing more from us about that over the course of the next few months. Just shelter in place, yeah. I think, you know, I've been offline pretty much all summer with our newsletters from the Safety and Firewise Committee. I hit you pretty hard in November, just about every week, but we'll be back at it again. And I think, we need to build awareness on the neighborhood that HVCC is a neighborhood emergency power station. The HVCA invested in an emergency backup generator. It's there to serve our community if the need arises, but we need to be prepared to invite our community into that space and use it as a power station and an emergency shelter station. Marin, and we need to help our community understand that Marin Horizon School is a designated community refuge area and how that can and should be used when we're directed to as a part of our emergency notification system. And I think that we really ought to focus on doing a recruitment for CERT volunteers. We really would benefit if we can build our CERT trained neighbors in our communities. With that, I've gone way too long, and that's it. So we still have time for Q&A. We're only 10 minutes behind schedule, but if you have any general questions for the group, or if you have something specific for Jesse or for Marshall, now is your opportunity. And most of you are muted. If you want to speak, be sure to turn on your mic and ask your question or make your statement or volunteer. Great time to volunteer. Wow. Jesse and Marcia, you guys are getting off easy tonight.
Well, one thing I would ask is, after this project is done, will there be a maintenance afterwards to keep the progress, keep things clipped down after, to keep the maintenance up on this, or is this a one-time deal?
No, so none of our projects, we don't want to spend all this time and effort and leave these projects with no maintenance plan. So, once the project is completed, we do have other funding sources to, fund the maintenance. Obviously, it's like ripping off a Band-Aid. The worst is the initial,
Right.
The highest cost is the initial, work being done. And so maintenance is a much more manageable on the budget.
Yeah.
But, some of these areas, may need treatment, the following year, especially with these heavily infested broom areas. But some areas may not need any work for 2 years. So we'll be monitoring these areas once the project is done, and certainly address and maintain the areas.
Is coyote bush is considered native? Will that
Yeah.
be cut out also?
So our goal is to keep the native vegetation, but break up the continuous amount of it. If it's a large amount, we want to create spacing between the vegetation to limit spread and fire that can transfer from large amounts of areas to other areas. So our goal is to remove the dead and dying coyote bush, but also maybe create some separation for the living ones.
I've never seen one die before. I mean, you cut it all the way back and it all grows back. And the thing is if you leave separation, then they have all these wild growing coyotes growing different, real rangy. And so sometimes it's best just to give it a haircut and then let it grow back.
Yeah, and
okay.
Yeah, we'll certainly leave that up to the contractor who gets awarded the bid. But I've actually seen dead coyote bush before, up in the Laddie Lane, Waterview, that hike from Panoramic down to the water tank down there. There is some dead coyote bush, I have to say.
After it'd been cut?
I don't know. I don't know. But I just saw it kind of intermixed with
right.
coyote bush. But obviously the severe years of drought hasn't really helped our vegetation out there and recovery. So there's work to be done, but kind of like I was saying, we do want to take in consideration the environment and work with our contractors and our partnering agency and take a look at all these individual sites that are along this project area.
Are masticators out?
For this one, yes. This is we're trying to fine tune these heavily wooded areas, and the best way is to do it by people power and address
some
it
of the
that way.
areas, and some of the areas are so have such heavy poison oak that it's going to be really tough for the crews in these areas where the poison oak is bad. With a masticator, they can just go in, do a one-time thing, and then but if that's the way, it's just poison oak is bad there in a lot of areas.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with poison oak. I'm actually very allergic with it. I don't know why I'm a vegetation guy. Me and poison oak do not go hand in hand.
Yeah, I'm not pals either.
So, but we do have to follow the scope of work document and what CEQA Panorama has given us guidelines to do. So in the
Okay.
project itself, we did not write in masticator equipment for this one.
Okay.
Marshall, I've got a question for you with regard to LRAD.
Yeah.
I know that next move is through the county and to the Board of Supervisors, possibly for their December meeting, but then potentially put off till their January meeting. What kind of a time frame do you anticipate following Board of Supervisor approval to being actually able to install the equipment?
Well, I'm happy to move forward as soon as possible to get this one installed, because it is kind of that one that's lingering.
Yeah.
Genesis is actively building us 2 additional sites right now. Those 2 additional sites are, we've got a couple different locations that are working through process. I don't want to delay this site. If those ones get delayed for whatever reason, we're kind of taking an approach with the future sites, throwing them out at the wall and see what sticks. So we're going and trying to vet out multiple sites, get them teed up, and then, only installing 1 or 2 sites at a time. I'm willing to have the contractors come up and install just 1 site. If that's what it takes. They prefer to come up and do, 3 or 4. We were really trying to squeeze this one in with our last round. Unfortunately, there's just a lot of pieces that I couldn't make work here. And trying to juggle all of these. All my efforts focus on getting Homestead installed. I know I'm getting pressure from the Chiefs. They want to see it in, but well before the next fire season as well. So we could see it. I confirmed with county parks. If this is successful going through the Board of Supervisors, obviously that's still one of those hurdles we have to go over. If they don't like it, if they think it, it just doesn't pass muster, then they can kick it back to us and we have to go back to the drawing board a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't anticipate that. I feel pretty confident moving forward. I think this is just a clerical thing, a legal thing. They just have to get the leasing agreement signed out. In that case, we could be looking at, January, February, potentially for the installation. I'd prefer to aim for January because I would like to get 1 audible test in before that January 15th bird nesting season it takes effect. That's to the community. At time of installation, we'll still have a small audible test just to confirm that we can hear it. It won't go very loud anywhere. It'll just be right there, but that just is part of the functionality test to ensure that they're functioning.
Right.
And then, but unfortunately, if we miss that window, that will sit silent to the community until basically, well, luckily the fire season is still, not luckily, but it's still fully fledged going, around August. So we'll start testing that. And that's when the community very likely will see a lot of information. Homestead's going to be unique because we are going to have to kind of, at least for the first couple of years, I think we're going to have to pepper the community with brochures and information just before August. And then, again, probably every single year because it's this ebb and flow, whereas the rest of the community just gets it all year round.
Yeah.
Everything from animals to children to just people. I want to make sure people are aware of what it is. Not to inadvertently startle anyone, and also just avoid all those hiccups, kind of like Jesse referred to, as we try and avoid the hiccups at all costs, but make sure we have the community support at the same time.
Okay, so it optimally, if you get a December approval from the board, you're thinking that it could be a January installation.
That's my goal. Push through towards the end of January. I have to coordinate. There's a lot of moving parts I have to coordinate, but that's going to be my push.
Okay.
If I can get on that agenda, I'm going to start putting things in play to make it happen.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just say thank you to all of you for all your hard work all the time. This was a great session. Thank you so much.
Well, I have a question for you, Madeline. I would suspect that you must have been able to hear the LRAD from up at the Evergreen Reservoir. Or
I did.
Green,
yeah, and I notified you in October, but I didn't in November. I'm sorry. I had to leave right away, but no, I heard it loud and clear. So.
Okay, so in your home?
Yes, right inside. I went outside to double check whether it was coming from up on the reservoir or Mill Valley or wherever, but it was coming from the Edgewood Reservoir.
Right. So. And it was clear and clearly audible.
Loud and clear. Yeah, great. Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. So that's what we have to look forward to.
Exactly. Right. Okay.
Nobody's going to sleep late on the first Saturday of each month.
I had an opportunity to do a low volume test during the Great Shakeout. The Bel Air campus had just recently had theirs installed over in the Tiburon area, and theirs is right on their campus, right next to the schools. And
Right.
knowing that the kids were actively on site, I turned it down. It's a shared site with the Tiburon PD.
Right.
So they wanted to test it during their shakeout like they always had done. We kind of cannibalized the pre-existing siren. So I turned it down to about 70% volume, got the message out there, and I stood about 200 yards away. Clear as day, did a decibel reading, came out at 70 decibels for that volume test. Worked great. I was very happy. Jesse advised me when I got back to the office all the way across Richardson Bay that our HR person had the window open and they could hear it clear as day as well.
Yeah.
And what I discovered looking at the topography is
Right.
that is sitting in a half bowl. And
Yeah.
it was a perfectly clear day. The water was glass, and it was able to shoot that sound all the way across the water, both siren and verbal message near the clear as day. And I was
Yeah.
just blown away because that's a good, 2.5 miles away, or maybe about 2 miles away. But yeah, I was quite impressed. We're also sitting right down at the water level too, so it was just it was good feedback to get a real test like that, which is unique, and that's why that Did You Hear It campaign is so important, because we get that feedback of where we're reaching and where we're not reaching.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, any other comments? Steve, any last remarks? Chris or Mike?
No.
Mike, was there anything else on the chat that we need to be aware of?
No additional questions.
Okay.
Oh, I guess Sheila wanted to know if we wanted to mention the earthquake seminar on January 6th.
Okay. There's another meeting coming up next week with regard to Four Corners and the traffic situation up at Four Corners. If you're interested in that, that's clearly a safety issue for our community. I'm going to try to get something out. I can't remember whether that's the 1st or the 6th of December. Does anybody online know? Yeah, I tried to find that before I came on tonight.
1st of December.
1st of December? Yeah.
One.
Yeah, okay. And yeah, so it's a public hearing to hear from the community our thoughts with regard to the traffic patterns up there at Four Corners and how to make it safer.
It's a Zoom meeting, so you need to sign up to.
Right.
Link.
Yeah.
Jim?
Yes, Chris.
I have someone else I would like to thank, Mike, who was just underwriting so much of what happens here. He built the database for the contact list, and he diligently corrects it. So he tests if an email bounces, he researches it and tries to figure out what the problem is. So he's working very hard to keep it an accurate, to make it an accurate contact list.
Good. Vitally important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I'd like to also thank Jesse for all the chipping work that he's helped me with, because it's been helping me get all this brush out. And so it is, I have the debris boxes, but the chipper is much easier to deal with, and I really appreciate it. It's really helped me along. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Maverick. It's certainly enjoy the partnership, It's the
Yeah,
least we can
me
do
too.
for all your hard work.
Me too. Thank you.
Jim Small.
As far as lists for the community, we have people moving in and out and different names and everything. What time of year should we forward to Chris and Mike our updates?
Well, Jim, I usually reach out to the contacts. I was doing it in the spring, but last year I did it in the winter. It seems like people have more spare time in the winter. So I'll reach out to all of the contacts, probably in the winter months, and just send you an email asking you if you will check your data list for accuracy, and then send any corrections to me.
Great.
And then Mike will work with that.
Good question. Thank you, Jim. All righty then, I'm really willing to quit.
Good.
All right. Thank you all. Appreciate you making the effort to be here this evening. Jesse, thank you very much for filling us in. And Marshall, thank you for bringing the good news. Both of you just delivered good news tonight. It's wonderful.
Lot
Thank
going
you for
on.
having us.
Yeah.
And thank you, Jim.
All righty. Take care, everybody. Nice to see you all.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah,
Bye.
good night.
Thank you.
Oh, if anybody hanging on, I'll have the video posted on YouTube hopefully by the end of the week. I'll send out an email to that effect.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay,
Thank
Okay.
you. Okay, bye.
good night.